She crawled barefoot through a blizzard to escape him. A cowboy shielded her with his life. The snow fell thick and heavy, covering the world in a white, blinding blanket. Every gust of wind cut like a sharp knife against her bare skin, and the cold seemed to seep into her bones. She could barely feel her fingers or toes anymore, but she kept moving. She had to. Every step, every crawl through the snow was a step toward freedom. Every heartbeat was a prayer that she would survive the night. Her name didn't matter in that moment. All that mattered was escaping him. He had been following her for hours, his presence a shadow that pressed against her mind and made her skin crawl. She didn't understand why he was doing this, only that she could not let him catch her. Not now, not ever. She had heard stories, warnings from friends and neighbors, and everything in her heart told her the danger was real. The blizzard was merciless, but it was her only chance. If the snow could hide her footprints, maybe it could hide her life. Her feet, already numb and bleeding from the ice and frozen ground, sank into the drifts with every movement. She bit back a scream as the cold bit deeper and deeper, and the wind whipped her hair across her face. She pressed forward on hands and knees, each motion a battle against the storm and her own exhaustion. Her lungs burned with each shallow breath, and her vision blurred as the snow filled her eyes. But fear propelled her. Survival propelled her. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly. She couldn't remember when she had started running, crawling, or dragging herself through the snow. Time had lost meaning. Only the sound of her own ragged breathing, the sharp crackle of ice under her hands, and the ever-present whisper of the wind remained. She had to find shelter, somewhere she could hide until morning. But every direction looked the same, every path seemed endless and unforgiving. At one point, she stumbled over a fallen branch buried under the snow. Pain shot through her ankle, but she didn't stop. She could barely feel the injury, so deep was the numbness from the cold. She forced herself onward, crawling over the snowbank and shoving herself through drifts that reached above her waist. She thought about giving up, thought about curling into a ball and letting the storm take her. But the thought of him finding her, of his hands closing around her, pushed her forward. She screamed into the wind, not that anyone could hear her, but to release the fear that threatened to suffocate her. Her body was trembling uncontrollably. Frostbite was creeping in, and she could no longer feel her toes at all. Her bare feet had become icy and stiff, leaving deep red impressions in the snow. She had lost her gloves somewhere along the way, and her fingers were nothing more than rigid sticks of ice. Her hair was plastered to her face with wet snow, her eyes red and burning, yet she refused to stop. Every ounce of her being was focused on one thought: she had to live. She thought she saw shadows moving in the distance and froze. Her mind screamed that he was close, following her through the storm, relentless and terrifying. She pressed herself lower into the snow, dragging herself behind a mound, hoping he wouldn't see her. The wind howled around her, but she could hear the faint crunch of footsteps. They weren't her own. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Tears mingled with the snow on her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "Just keep going, don't stop. Don't let him find you." The words were a lifeline, a thread holding her together as exhaustion and fear threatened to consume her. Her body ached from crawling, from dragging herself over ice and frozen soil. Every muscle felt like lead, yet she refused to give in. Giving in meant death. Giving in meant he would win. Somewhere ahead, the world seemed to shimmer with movement, though the blizzard made it impossible to see clearly. She crawled toward it, not knowing what she was moving into, only that she had to move. Her fingers were raw and bloody from gripping snow and ice, and she could no longer feel the ground beneath her feet. But then, a sound, sharp and unmistakable, reached her ears. It was not the storm. It was the faint but certain sound of hooves crunching against snow. She froze, unsure if the sound was a threat or a sign of salvation. Her breath caught in her throat, and she pulled herself lower into the drift. But then, she realized the rhythm of the hooves was steady, purposeful, and not hunting. The presence didn't feel like fear. It felt protective. She dared to peek, shielding her eyes against the snow, and saw a figure emerging through the storm. A man on horseback, tall and steady, moving against the wind as if he belonged there. Relief and disbelief fought inside her. Could this be real? Could someone actually be coming to save her? She wanted to call out to reach him, but the words froze in her mouth. Instead, she crawled toward the sound, her energy almost spent, her body trembling violently. The horse drew closer, and she could see his face now, set with determination, eyes scanning the blizzard as though he had been waiting for her. He dismounted with effortless skill, moving through the snow as if it were nothing. The man reached her in moments, kneeling down and offering a hand. She took it, her fingers icy and weak, and he pulled her to her feet. She stumbled, nearly falling again, and he caught her without a word. The warmth radiating from his body was almost painful to feel after the freezing cold. For the first time in hours, she felt a glimmer of hope. "I've got you," he said, his voice calm and strong, carrying over the roar of the wind. "You're safe now, just hold on." She wanted to believe him, to cling to him as if he were the only anchor in a world gone mad with snow and fear. He guided her to the horse, helping her onto the saddle behind him. She clung to his waist, wrapping her arms around him despite the awkwardness and cold, and he shifted to shield her from the blizzard with his own body. The horse moved carefully, its hooves crunching against hidden ice and drifted snow, navigating a path that she couldn't even imagine. Her muscles ached, her lungs burned, but the presence of this man gave her strength she didn't know she had. She pressed her face against his back, letting the warmth and steady motion calm her trembling. She could still hear the faint whisper of footsteps in the distance, the shadow of her pursuer moving closer. But the cowboy didn't falter. He moved swiftly yet cautiously, guiding the horse through safer ground, always keeping her hidden from view. Hours passed like this, the storm relentless and unforgiving. But slowly, imperceptibly, the fear that had gripped her began to shift. It wasn't gone, not yet. She could still feel the shadow of danger trailing her, but it was no longer the only force in her world. The man behind her, steady and determined, gave her hope. Every breath she took was easier, every heartbeat more bearable because she was no longer alone. The blizzard showed no mercy, but together they pressed forward. Snow piled higher, wind shredded at their clothes, but he never faltered. He shifted himself to block the worst of it, his hands steady on the reins, his eyes scanning every movement around them. She felt safe in a way she hadn't in hours, maybe in her entire life. The terror that had once consumed her began to feel distant, almost manageable because he had become her shield. And through the storm, through the endless white, she realized that she was not giving up. She had come too far. She had survived the impossible. And now, with the cowboy by her side, there was a chance she might see daylight again, a chance she might live to tell the story. The blizzard raged on, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she dared to believe in something other than fear. The wind still howled like a wild animal through the trees, but the woman clung to the cowboy behind her, letting the warmth of his body and the steady motion of the horse guide her through the blizzard. Every step felt like a small victory. She could feel her fingers slowly regaining some sensation, though her toes remained numb, hidden in the snow. Every mile they traveled, she felt herself moving farther from danger. The cowboy never spoke more than necessary, but every word he did say carried calm authority. "Hold on tight," he instructed once, tightening his grip on her around the waist. His voice was low, steady, and comforting. Even amidst the chaos of the storm, there was a sense of control in the way he moved, as if he knew exactly where they needed to go. His eyes scanned every shadow, every movement, always alert, always watching. The snowdrifts rose high around them, and at times the horse disappeared almost entirely in the white waves. The woman pressed her face closer against the cowboy's back, willing herself to stay upright despite her exhaustion. She wanted to say something, to thank him, to explain the fear she had carried for so long, but the words wouldn't come. She realized she was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the relief, from the realization that someone cared enough to risk everything for her safety. Every now and then, the faint crunch of snow in the distance reminded her that danger was not far behind. She could feel her heart skip a beat whenever the sound reached her ears, but the cowboy's presence reassured her. He was unshakable, his body firm and protective as he guided the horse through the worst of the storm. He shifted slightly to block the wind, pulling her closer when the cold became unbearable. In that moment, she felt an unfamiliar but welcome comfort, a sense that she was not alone. As they moved, the terrain changed subtly. The deep snow gave way to patches of icy ground, and the horse had to tread carefully. At one point, they came upon a small slope that rose sharply ahead. The snow was packed and slippery, but the cowboy guided the horse with skill, leaning into each movement and steadying the animal. She gripped him tightly, fearing a fall, but he never faltered. The horse's hooves slipped in the ice more than once, but he kept them both balanced, moving forward with determination. Hours passed slowly, marked only by the rhythm of the horse and the relentless wind. The woman's body ached from the cold, from the ride, and from the injuries she had sustained while fleeing. Her feet were raw and stiff, her fingers red and cracked, but she refused to cry. She refused to give in. Survival had become a single-minded goal, and she clung to the cowboy as a lifeline. He noticed her shivering and shifted again, his voice calm. "It's going to be okay. We just need to keep moving. The storm won't last forever." He handed her a small piece of cloth from his coat, allowing her to cover her face. It was barely enough to block the icy wind, but it helped. She wrapped herself in it, feeling the faint warmth against her skin. For the first time in hours, she felt a small flicker of hope. The blizzard was unrelenting, yet the cowboys' skill and knowledge of the land gave them an advantage. He took hidden paths through the woods, tracks less visible to anyone following. At one point, they crossed a frozen stream, the ice creaking under the weight of the horse. The woman froze in fear, but he encouraged the animal steadily, his hands firm on the reins. She squeezed her eyes shut and prayed silently, trusting in his experience. The horse slipped once, then regained its footing, and they were safe on the other side. During a brief moment of calm, the woman dared to look at the cowboy. His face was set with determination, framed by a hat dusted with snow, eyes sharp and watchful. Despite the storm, there was an air of strength about him, a confidence that seemed unshakable. She felt a strange sense of admiration mixed with relief. He was a stranger, yet he risked everything to save her. His courage made her feel less afraid, less hopeless. The danger of her pursuer lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind. She could not forget why she was fleeing. The thought of being caught again made her stomach turn. But the cowboy's presence was a shield, a barrier against the fear threatening to overwhelm her. With every step, she felt herself growing stronger, even as her body weakened. There was something about knowing that someone believed in her survival that gave her the courage to endure. At one point, they needed to rest. The horse moved slowly through a small clearing, and the cowboy guided her to dismount. The snow crunched beneath their feet as he helped her to a safer spot among a cluster of trees, where the wind was slightly less harsh. He set the horse to graze, careful to keep it close, and began checking her injuries. Her feet were badly frozen, and the skin was cracked from the icy ground. He examined them gently, wrapping them in cloth from his coat. The warmth of his hands was soothing, almost enough to take the sting away. "You're doing well," he said softly. "Just a little longer and we'll find shelter. You've come far and you're still moving." "That matters." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that filled her with determination. She had been so afraid before, so certain of failure, but his encouragement made her feel capable, strong, and resilient. The night began to deepen around them, the storm showing no signs of slowing. Visibility dropped even further, but the cowboy did not panic. He guided them carefully, choosing paths that would lead them away from roads or areas where the pursuer might search. At one point, he paused to listen to the wind, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the snowy expanse. He was alert, aware of every sound, every movement. She realized that his calmness was not just bravery, it was skill, experience, and awareness honed by years in harsh conditions. Despite the cold and exhaustion, she managed to speak, her voice small but determined. "Thank you for helping me." He didn't turn to look at her, but his tone softened slightly. "You do the same for someone in need. Just hold on, keep moving. We're not done yet." The journey continued, each step a test of endurance. Her legs and arms were raw from climbing over drifts and crawling through snow before she met him. Her lungs burned with each breath, yet she found a rhythm, a way to move that allowed her to survive the cold and pain. The cowboy stayed close, adjusting his position to block the worst of the wind, his hands firm on the reins, his body a steady barrier against the storm. As the hours passed, a bond began to form, unspoken but powerful. She could sense his concern, his determination to keep her safe, and she trusted him more than anyone she had ever known. His courage inspired her. His presence gave her strength. The fear that had once dominated her mind began to recede, replaced by a cautious hope. Finally, in the distance, she saw a faint glimmer of something through the storm. It was unclear at first, a structure, maybe a small barn or a cabin, but it offered a promise of shelter. She wanted to cry at the sight, overwhelmed by the possibility of warmth, protection, and safety. The cowboy guided the horse carefully toward it, his eyes scanning constantly for any sign of danger. As they approached, the wind began to die down slightly, though the snow continued to fall. The small building came into clearer view, and she could see that it was sturdy, a safe haven in the heart of the storm. Her body shook with relief and exhaustion, and she leaned heavily against the cowboy, grateful for every ounce of strength he had shared with her. He helped her down from the horse, steadying her as they moved toward the door. The warmth from inside was faint but unmistakable, a stark contrast to the icy storm outside. She took a deep breath, feeling the chills slowly retreat from her bones. She was alive. She had survived the blizzard. And though the danger had not fully passed, she felt safer than she had in hours, maybe in days. The cowboy kept his eyes on the surrounding snow as they entered the building. He moved with the same alertness, the same careful control, but there was a hint of relief in his posture. He guided her to a corner, helping her sit on a wooden bench. He tended to her feet once more, wrapping them with dry cloth and offering what little warmth he could. "You're safe here," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "The storm is harsh, but you made it. You're going to be okay now." For the first time, she allowed herself to truly rest. Her body, exhausted and numb, slumped against the wall. Her eyes closed and tears slipped down her cheeks, not from fear, but from relief and gratitude. The cowboy remained nearby, his watchful gaze never leaving the doorway, ensuring that nothing could disturb the fragile peace of the moment. Though the blizzard raged outside, inside that small building, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, protection, and the presence of someone willing to risk everything for her survival. She realized that this night, terrifying and relentless as it had been, had also brought her something extraordinary, a human connection in the face of danger. A reminder that courage and kindness could still exist even in the harshest conditions. And for the first time since the flight began, she dared to hope that the night would end, that morning would come, and that she might finally be free from fear. The small barn they had found offered a temporary reprieve, but the storm outside showed no mercy. Snow continued to fall in thick, blinding sheets, piling higher against the sides of the building. The wind rattled the wooden walls, and the roof groaned under the weight of accumulated ice. Inside, the woman shivered violently, even under the cowboy's coat and the scraps of warmth he could offer. Her feet still throbbed from frostbite, her hands stiff and red, and her body ached from the relentless journey through the blizzard. The cowboy knelt in front of her, gently removing the icy snow from her feet and wrapping them with dry cloth he had kept in his pack. He worked quickly but carefully, his hands steady and sure. "We need to keep them warm," he said, his voice calm. "If they stay cold, frostbite could get worse. We'll do everything we can until morning." She watched him, amazed by his skill and his attention to detail. She had never met anyone so calm in the face of danger, someone so dedicated to protecting another person. Her fear, which had consumed her for so long, began to ebb slightly. She realized she could trust him with her life, not just because of his strength or courage, but because he clearly cared. Hours passed slowly. The storm outside intensified, making the small barn feel like a fragile shell against the power of nature. The woman tried to rest, but sleep was elusive. Every shadow, every creak of the building made her heart race. She imagined him outside, following them, watching for any opportunity to strike. The memory of his face, cruel and relentless, burned in her mind. She hugged her knees to her chest and trembled, even as the cowboy remained close. He noticed her anxiety and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know it's hard," he said softly, "but you've come this far. You survived the blizzard and now we're inside. That's what matters. We can't let fear take over. We just have to be ready for whatever comes next." The woman nodded, trying to absorb his words. They were simple, but they carried a weight she had not felt in a long time. He was right. She had survived impossible odds already. The storm, the blizzard, the freezing cold, they had not broken her. And with him by her side, maybe she could survive anything. They gathered what little resources the barn offered. A small pile of dry hay provided minimal insulation, and the cowboy managed to light a small fire using a flint and some dry wood he had carried. The flames were weak at first, barely holding against the cold, but soon they flickered and grew, casting a warm glow across the barn's interior. The woman sat close to the fire, allowing the warmth to seep into her frozen muscles. For the first time, she felt a small measure of comfort. As the fire crackled, the cowboy shared some of his supplies, a small loaf of bread, a piece of jerky, and some water he had kept warm in a thermos. She ate slowly, savoring the simple meal and the sense of safety that accompanied it. He kept his eyes on the barn's entrance, alert for any sign of the pursuer or other threats. She realized that his calm vigilance was another layer of protection, another reason she could begin to breathe again. The night stretched on, and the storm outside showed no sign of letting up. The woman, exhausted from her journey, finally allowed herself to rest her head on her knees. The cowboy remained nearby, maintaining a careful watch. She could hear the faint groan of the barn under the weight of the snow, the wind howling around the structure, and the occasional crack of ice breaking in the distance. Every sound reminded her that danger had not completely passed, but she felt safer than she had in hours. Despite the temporary calm, the presence of the pursuer loomed over her thoughts. She could still imagine him searching through the storm, relentless and patient, unwilling to give up. The fear that had driven her through the blizzard returned in small, sharp waves, but she focused on the cowboy's steady presence. He was her anchor, and that gave her strength. Hours blurred together as they waited. The woman drifted in and out of sleep, each moment of rest a brief escape from the terror that had gripped her for so long. The cowboy remained alert, his eyes scanning the shadows outside the barn, listening to the sounds of the storm. She could see the fatigue etched into his face, but he did not complain, did not falter. His dedication to her safety was unwavering, and she marveled at the courage it must have taken to face such a storm while protecting someone else. At one point, she woke to a faint sound outside, a footstep in the snow, a shadow moving against the dim light of the storm. Her heart leapt into her throat. The cowboy immediately stiffened, his hand going to the hilt of a small tool he carried for protection. "Stay low," he whispered. "Don't make a sound." They listened in tense silence. The steps grew closer, then paused, and for a long moment neither of them moved. The sound of the wind masked their presence, but the tension was almost unbearable. The woman could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, fear and adrenaline coursing through her body. After what felt like an eternity, the steps moved away, fading into the storm. The woman exhaled shakily, grateful that the immediate threat had passed. She realized how close they had come, how easily the pursuer could have found them if the storm had not worked in their favor. The cowboy remained calm, but she could see the alertness in his eyes, the readiness to act at a moment's notice. The rest of the night continued in this tense rhythm. They maintained the fire, tended to her injuries, and stayed alert for any sign of danger. She began to feel a growing respect for the cowboy, not just for his bravery, but for his patience, his intelligence, and his unwavering commitment to her safety. She had never known anyone like him before, and in the quiet moments between the storm and the fear, she began to feel a deep sense of gratitude. As the hours passed, the storm began to weaken slightly. The wind lost some of its fury, and the snow fell more gently. The woman could see faint light breaking through the clouds, a sign that dawn might be approaching. She felt a renewed sense of hope. The worst of the blizzard might be over, and with it perhaps the immediate danger as well. The cowboy noticed the change too. "Looks like the storm is easing," he said quietly. "We should be able to move soon. Stay close to me and we'll get out safely." She nodded, her body still trembling from cold and exhaustion, but her spirit lifted by the promise of morning. The thought of surviving the night, of seeing daylight again, filled her with relief and cautious optimism. She knew they were not entirely safe yet, but the sense of hope made her feel stronger, more determined to survive. As dawn broke, the snow-covered landscape glimmered in soft light. The barn, though battered by the storm, had provided shelter and safety. The woman took a deep breath, savoring the crisp, clean air and the faint warmth of the sun on her face. She felt a small sense of triumph. She had survived the blizzard, survived the night, and had someone by her side who had risked everything to keep her safe. The cowboy led her outside carefully, guiding the horse through the remaining snowdrifts. The storm had left the world transformed, blanketed in white and sparkling in the early light. The woman could see tracks in the snow, evidence of their struggle and survival. She realized how close they had come to disaster and how much courage it had taken to endure the night. Together, they moved cautiously through the landscape, heading toward safety. Every step was careful, every movement deliberate, but she felt a growing confidence. With the cowboy by her side, she knew she could continue, no matter what lay ahead. She had faced the worst of nature and survived, and now with his guidance and protection she could face the next challenge as well. Through the exhaustion, the fear, and the pain, she discovered a new sense of strength. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger, but about finding courage in the face of adversity, trusting in others, and holding on to hope even when everything seemed lost. The night had tested her in every possible way, but she had endured, and she was not alone. The barn behind them became a distant memory, a symbol of shelter and temporary relief, but the journey ahead was just beginning. The blizzard had passed, but the world remained unpredictable and harsh. The cowboy's guidance, skill, and unwavering bravery were her lifeline, and she understood that survival depended on courage, trust, and the determination to keep moving forward. As they continued through the snowy landscape, the woman felt a growing sense of gratitude and admiration. She had witnessed heroism in its purest form, a selfless act of protection and courage. The night had been terrifying, but it had also revealed something extraordinary: the capacity for human kindness, bravery, and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. And as the sun rose higher, illuminating the snowy terrain, she allowed herself a small smile. She had survived, she had hope, and she had found someone willing to shield her with his life. The journey was far from over, but she knew with unwavering certainty that she was not alone, and that gave her the strength to continue. The sun had finally risen, casting soft light over the snow-covered landscape. The blizzard had weakened, leaving behind a sparkling world of white that stretched as far as the eye could see. The woman took a deep breath, letting the cold, crisp air fill her lungs. For the first time in what felt like days, she allowed herself to feel relief. The night of terror and struggle was behind her, and though danger had not completely vanished, hope now guided her steps. The cowboy remained by her side, his horse moving carefully over the snowy ground. Every step was deliberate, as if he could sense hidden obstacles beneath the snow. His eyes scanned the horizon constantly, still alert, still protective. She realized that his vigilance had not waned in the slightest, even after the storm had passed. He had risked so much to keep her safe, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude that words could barely express. They moved cautiously, knowing that her pursuer might still be somewhere in the area, though the likelihood seemed lower now. Tracks in the snow were faint, partially covered by drifting snow, and the wind had erased some of the evidence of their passage. The woman clung to the cowboy, feeling safer with every step. His calm, steady presence was a shield against lingering fear, and she leaned on him both physically and emotionally. After some time, they saw a faint trail leading toward a small farm in the distance. Smoke rose from a chimney, and the soft outline of a barn suggested that there were people nearby. Relief surged in her chest. She could see that safety was within reach, that she would not have to face another night alone in the freezing snow. She tried to quicken her pace, urging the horse forward gently, but the cowboy held her back with a firm hand. "Take it slow," he said. "We're almost there, but we need to be careful. One misstep could mean injury or worse. Trust me." She nodded, swallowing her impatience. His judgment had kept her alive, and she knew it was wise to follow his lead. The snow underfoot was still slippery, and hidden patches of ice could send them tumbling if they rushed. The woman felt her muscles ache from the past hours, from crawling, running, and enduring the storm. She realized how close she had come to collapsing entirely, and she owed her survival to this man who had risked his own safety for her. As they approached the farm, a figure emerged from the barn, waving to them. The woman felt her heart leap. Help had arrived. The farmhouse door opened wider and a family stepped out, bringing blankets, warm drinks, and a sense of comfort she had not felt in days. The cowboy guided her carefully from the horse, supporting her as her frozen legs struggled to carry her. She felt tears prick her eyes, a mix of relief, exhaustion, and gratitude. The family welcomed them warmly, immediately tending to her injuries and helping her warm up. The fire inside the house was a stark contrast to the harsh cold they had endured outside. She sat close to it, letting the warmth seep into her numb fingers and feet. The cowboy remained by her side, keeping watch near the door, but his expression softened slightly as he allowed himself a moment of rest. For the first time, she could speak clearly. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to ever repay you." The cowboy shook his head gently. "You don't need to repay me," he said. "I did what anyone would do. You needed help and I was here. That's enough." She looked at him, seeing not just the rugged exterior of a man used to the wilderness, but the quiet strength, the courage, and the kindness that had carried them both through the night. She realized how extraordinary his actions had been. He had put himself at risk in a blizzard, navigating dangerous terrain, shielding her from both the storm and her pursuer. His heroism was real, tangible, and had saved her life. The hours passed, and the woman slowly regained her strength. The warmth of the fire, the comfort of dry clothes, and the presence of kind strangers made her feel alive again. She shared a simple meal, sipping hot tea, her body still shivering but gradually coming back to life. The cowboy remained nearby, sharing occasional words of reassurance, but mostly letting her recover in peace. Outside, the snow had settled into a sparkling landscape. The blizzard had passed completely, leaving the world quiet and still, almost serene. The woman watched from the window, reflecting on everything that had happened. The terror, the exhaustion, the endless struggle, it all seemed like a distant memory now, softened by the warmth and safety around her. Yet she knew that without the cowboy, none of this would have been possible. He had guided her through the storm, protected her from danger, and given her hope when she had none left. The gratitude she felt was deep, and she knew that she would never forget the man who had shielded her with his life. As the day wore on, they spoke quietly about the events of the night. She told him fragments of her story, explaining why she had been running, why she had been so terrified. He listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He offered advice, guidance, and encouragement, but above all, he listened. His calm presence allowed her to speak freely, to release some of the fear and tension that had gripped her for so long. At one point, he looked at her with a gentle expression. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "You survived a storm that would have defeated most people. And you kept moving, kept fighting, even when everything seemed impossible. That's something to be proud of." She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She realized that his words were true. She had survived not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. She had endured a terrifying ordeal and come out the other side, and she had not done it alone. The day passed with small moments of comfort, warm blankets, shared stories, and the quiet reassurance of safety. She began to feel more like herself again, her body recovering, her mind settling, her fear easing. And through it all, the cowboy remained nearby, a steady presence she could rely on. By evening, the farm was calm. The snow outside reflected the last light of the day, turning the world into a soft, glowing landscape. The woman sat by the fire, thinking about everything that had happened. The blizzard had tested her in ways she could never have imagined. It had pushed her to her limits, exposed her fears, and demanded courage she didn't know she possessed. And through it all, one person had been there, guiding her, protecting her, and giving her hope. She realized that she owed her life to him, not just because he had helped her survive the storm, but because he had shown her the strength of human kindness and bravery. His courage had inspired her, his patience had comforted her, and his presence had reminded her that even in the darkest moments, there was hope. Finally, as night fell and the stars appeared in the clear sky, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in days. The storm was over, the danger had passed, and she was safe. She looked at the cowboy, who was standing quietly near the door, watching over her even in the calm. She wanted to say more than thank you. She wanted to convey all the gratitude, admiration, and relief she felt, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, she simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of everything he had done. He returned the gesture with a faint smile, and in that quiet exchange a bond was formed, unspoken but unbreakable. He had shielded her with his life, and she would never forget it. The night continued quietly, filled with warmth, safety, and reflection. She allowed herself to rest fully for the first time, knowing that the world outside was calm, and that she had survived one of the most harrowing experiences of her life. She thought about the blizzard, the danger, the fear, and the courage it had taken to endure it all. And she thought about the cowboy, who had been her protector, her guide, and her shield. As she drifted into sleep, she realized that life had changed. The night of terror had ended, but the memory of courage, heroism, and human kindness would stay with her forever. She had faced the storm, survived danger, and learned that even in the harshest conditions, hope could prevail. And she had learned that sometimes, strangers could become heroes, saving lives and restoring faith in the goodness of people. When she awoke, the world was bright and peaceful. The snow sparkled under the morning sun, and the cold, sharp air felt fresh and clean. She looked around the farm, grateful for the warmth, safety, and care she had been given. And she knew that no matter what the future held, she would never forget the cowboy who had risked everything to protect her. He remained outside for a while, ensuring that the area was safe, tending to his horse and watching the horizon. She observed him silently, understanding that his bravery had not been a momentary act. It was part of who he was. Courage, strength, and integrity defined him, and his actions had left a permanent mark on her life. Finally, as the day unfolded, she prepared to continue her journey. She knew she had survived something extraordinary, and she felt stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The blizzard was over, the danger had passed, and a new day had begun. A day filled with promise, hope, and the knowledge that she had been shielded by a remarkable person when she needed it most. She turned to the cowboy one last time before leaving the farm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "Stay safe," he said, "and remember you're stronger than you know." With that, she stepped forward into the bright morning, leaving the barn behind but carrying with her the memory of courage, kindness, and survival. The blizzard had tested her in every way possible, but she had endured, and she had learned the true meaning of resilience. And somewhere in her heart, she knew that she would never forget the cowboy who had shielded her with his life.